Meetings, meetings, meetings. How many times have you rued the fact that you have to attend yet another meeting? Unfortunately, in the workplace, in our professional life, we are required to attend or participate in a number of meetings of so many different kinds that cannot be avoided. What we can do is to make the best of it and look at a meeting in a positive way as a place where we can find our group identity and also make effective contributions either as a team leader or as a participant. So, in this module, we will look at meetings. We look at effective speaking in meetings, and in the first unit, I will take you through how to lead a meeting. Most of you, those of you who are have not started their careers or about to start on their career would probably not be leading a meeting. They would be participating in a meeting, but at some stage or the other, you would be required to lead a meeting. So, let's look at what does one need to do to lead a meeting effectively. Now, there are three aspects of leading a meeting. The first is planning, the second is facilitating, and the third is follow-up. I am going to, in the next 30 minutes or so, we are going to take up each of these aspects. Let's begin with planning. So, first of all, do we need to meet at all? Now, as you say, oh, yet another meeting, once again I have to spare time for a meeting, and people don't show up for a meeting, people have so many engagements, that's difficult to get people together for a meeting. So, first of all, a leader needs to decide, do you need to meet at all? Is it necessary to have a meeting? Is the work that you want to accomplish during the meeting, can it be done without meeting? Can it be done through email? Can it be done through calling people individually? Is it necessary for people to get together? So, first of all, decide whether you need to meet or don't meet at all. That's the first job of a leader. Make sure you need a meeting. Now, this is Jeff Haddon in his article 9 Hardcore Steps to Leading Incredibly Effective Meetings. I have drawn on his article to share these tips with you, in which he talks about what we have different kinds of meeting. So, we have regular meetings like monthly meetings, weekly meetings, once in a annual meetings, or occasional meetings. So, Jeff Haddon suggests that instead of meeting regularly, never set a schedule, because according to him, consistency breeds complacency. So, after a while, the Monday meeting, we all have the Monday meeting blues, and after a while the Monday meeting becomes just another entry on a calendar, and you say, oh, yet another weekly meeting or yet another monthly meeting, and attendees stop preparing and quit caring. So, if at all possible, set a different date. Don't do all your meetings, staff meetings on Mondays. Maybe you could vary them and have it on a Tuesday or a different day, a different date or different time. And if you meet weekly, alternate days of the week, mornings and afternoons, and even goes so far as to set unusual times, like really early or really late in the day. The more unusual you can make a meeting, the more likely your team is to see the meeting as notable and worth preparing for. So, never set a regular schedule. Now, I said the first part of a meeting or leading a meeting is planning for the meeting. What is the pre-work prior to the meeting? You need to distribute and review this pre-work. The first important, what are the priorities? What is it that needs to be covered What are the results you need to accomplish at the meeting? That's the second thing. The third is, who needs to attend the meeting for a meeting to be successful? What's the sequence in the order in which you would cover the topics? The timing. Well, how much time would you spend on each topic? Date and time. When will the meeting take place? And where will the meeting take place? So these are some of the issues that you need to consider as part of planning of the meeting, the homework that one needs to do before the meeting proper. These are the things you need to keep in mind. Now, the first thing in a meeting, as in a presentation, is what is the objective of having a meeting? Why have you called this meeting, first of all? Your objective needs to be very clear. Stephen Covey says in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, begin with the end in mind. What do you want to accomplish with the meeting? After calling the meeting, you need to be very clear about that. A meeting must have a very specific and defined purpose. So, standing meetings with vague purposes such as status update are rarely a good use of time. So, first thing is, make your objectives clear. The second important part of planning of a meeting is you need to decide who needs to be present at the meeting. Consider who is invited. Ensure appropriate participation at the meeting. Now, many of us attend meetings where just by being member of a certain group, of a department, of an institution, we are called to meetings. But in meetings of this kind, one doesn't quite know what one is expected to do, except that the person who's calling the meeting assumes that this is a democratic way of arriving at decisions. So, I know people who take every small decision to the entire group because they don't want to sound undemocratic, and sometimes it's a very clever ploy to make sure that they get support from the maximum number of people and avoid responsibility. In my opinion, that's a waste of time, because you don't need to call the entire group. You should call only the people who really need to be there. So, if you're announcing a change, invite the people who are affected by the announcement. If you're trying to resolve a problem, invite the people who will be good sources of information for a solution. When people feel that what's being discussed isn't relevant to them, or they don't have the skills or expertise to be of assistance, they'll view the attendance in the meeting as a waste of time. So, the second important point to keep in mind is who should be invited. Think of appropriate participation in the meeting. Call only those people who you think will contribute effectively or have a role to play in the meeting, unless your institution's policies demand that everyone should be present at the meeting. The next thing is to frame the agenda of your meeting, to set the agenda of a meeting. Now, in preparing the agenda, again, Haddon says that you must think of an agenda which only lists action items. Create an agenda that lays out everything you plan to cover with the meeting, along with a timeline that allots a certain number of minutes to each item, and email it or send hard copies to people in advance. An agenda should never include information such as information, recap, review or discussion. It could be just 2 sentences like determine the product launch date or select software developer for database redesign. The goal of a good meeting is to decide or to do something. Now, we do have meetings where the objective is to inform. Sometimes in an organization which is not vertical, very often decisions have to be passed down the hierarchy by the head of an institution to people down below, those who are not present at a particular meeting. And then another meeting is called where the person who was representing the larger group shares that information with the rest of the group. So there are meetings where one needs to inform. They're not, all the meetings are not meetings where one makes decisions. Now, never use the meeting again, he says, to share information. Information should be shared before the meeting. Now, if I need to make a decision during a meeting, shouldn't I have the information I need to make that decision? So, whatever information you think is relevant, documents, reports, data, etc., you could send them to the participants in advance. Using meetings as a way to share information is unproductive, a waste of time, and well, lazy. That's what he says. If anyone in a meeting says, "I'm just thinking out aloud," then you haven't done your job. Their thoughts should have already be together. Use the pre-work in the meeting. So, whatever work you have done prior to setting the meeting, it should be brought out in the meeting. Now, let's think of the purpose. The purpose of a meeting should not be merely to inform, nor should the purpose of a meeting merely be to promote team cohesion. We do have meetings of this kind where people are invited so that they can get to interact with one another as a group, and the assumption is that when groups get together, they'll get to know each other and it will improve interpersonal relationships. But that's a different kind of meeting. Those are interpersonal. The relationship is interpersonal rather than productive. So, team members do need to work together, but we don't have to hang out in order to become a unit. Great business relationships are created when people can count on each other to do their part, meet commitments, get things done, in short, produce tangible outcomes. So, we don't need to have a meeting to promote team cohesion. Now, we come to the second part of leading a meeting. The second part of leading a meeting is to facilitate a meeting. How does one facilitate a meeting? So, what are the things that one needs to keep in mind? That what is the objective of a meeting? It's not just to make decisions. If the decisions are made and they are percolated or communicated to the group, one doesn't always get a good feeling. The ultimate aim of a meeting, in my understanding, is a meeting where everyone comes out looking happy. Now, this is not always the case. An ideal meeting and a real meeting are very different, because in a real meeting there are always people who come out looking unhappy. They are unhappy with the decisions that are made in the meeting, but one should try to see that, make sure that maximum satisfaction for everyone, and what are the things one can do to make sure that everyone comes out looking satisfied. First of all, establish ground rules early, which will create a framework for how your group functions. Second is to ensure that the meeting stays on the topic. List all the tasks that are generated at a meeting. Make a note of who's assigned to do what and by when. At the close of the meeting, quickly summarize next steps and inform everyone that you will be sending out a meeting summary. So, now let's examine how to facilitate a meeting in more detail. First of all, start on time, end on time. If you have the responsibility for running regular meetings and you have a reputation for being someone who starts and ends promptly, you will be amazed how many of your colleagues will make every effort to attend a meeting. That doesn't always happen, because we have meetings where people don't start on time and the meetings drag on endlessly. We hate going to those meetings, but because one might have another task to follow up and one is never sure how long the meeting will take. So those who keep to the time and state or perhaps give you an idea how long the meeting will take, you don't mind attending those meetings. People appreciate it when you understand how valuable their time is. Don't schedule any meeting to last longer than an hour, because people don't have the patience. 60 minutes is generally the longest time people can remain truly engaged. Sometimes we have these marathon meetings, brainstorming meetings, decision making meetings, emergency meetings, where people are expected to be there for hours and you're waiting, okay, when is the meeting going to end, and when am I going to get home or get on to my work? So try not to have those meetings unless it's absolutely necessary. From there, the next thing is to ban technology. How often have you caught people sneaking at their SMS messages, their phone, their Blackberries, their iPads to check their mails, to check their emails, to send messages? And if people are doing that, you can take it for granted that they are not going to contribute to the meeting because they're not paying attention to what you're saying. So instead, they'll be emailing, surfing the web, or just playing around with their technologies. So make sure that eyes are up there, looking at you or whoever's speaking. Stick to your schedule. Once you're in a meeting, put the agenda up on a screen or whiteboard for others to see. It doesn't always have to be on a whiteboard or screen. If it's an informal meeting or it's a small group meeting, perhaps you can just state the agenda of the meeting. You say this is the agenda, and if you have circulated the agenda items in advance, you could just begin the meeting by saying that we are meeting for this purpose and these are the items on the agenda. At the end of each agenda item, quickly summarize what was said and ask people to confirm that it's a fair summary. Very often we move on to a new point without resolving the prior point in the agenda, and at the end of it, people have forgotten what you said or what each person said or what the decision was. So the best thing is to summarize what was said and get the people's consent. In case they have an agreement, they would say, no, I didn't say this, or this is not the decision we took. So it's a good way of revisiting each point instead of at the end of a meeting. Now, make notes regarding follow-up, note items that need further discussion. While you are at a meeting, you must watch the body language and make adjustments necessary. So if you find somebody is looking at their watch, make sure maybe you need a break, or maybe you need to stop someone from speaking too much, and when you end the meeting, close on a note of achievement. Now, the second important part of leading a meeting is how to deal with people. The first part was planning a meeting, facilitating a meeting. The second part is how to deal with people. Remember not to take, now think of a meeting where you have not been very effective. I have often been at meetings where people are screaming at one another, and the person who has called a meeting is not able to control the group because the rules are not stated clearly. The person who is leading the meeting is not paying attention to people who are creating trouble, or perhaps doesn't use the right way of telling them what to do. So very often we find that in a meeting there are certain people who like to hog the discussion. You would find that they like to make their presence felt. They are domineering by nature. Even if they are not domineering by nature, they want to have a say in the meeting, and they tend to hog all the conversation. So if you find that there are people of this kind, make sure that ask others for their ideas, and because nothing derails a meeting faster than one person taking more than his fair share. If you notice that one person is monopolizing the conversation, call him out and say, we appreciate your contributions, but now we need to get input from others before making a decision. You can be public about it. Now, what are the things you need to do to make sure that you can involve each participant in actions? First of all, control the garrulous, those who tend to take too much time saying what they want to say, those who want to dominate the conversation, or don't let anyone else speak. Try to control them. The second part is to draw out the silent. There are people in a group, either because of the status difference or because they are reticent by nature. There are people who remain silent throughout the meeting even if they have something important to contribute, and you are losing out by not getting their inputs because they haven't had a say, they haven't had a chance to have their say in the meeting. So, draw out the silent, protect the weak. Very often, and I have watched this happening at meetings, that there are people, there is a core group, there is a group which is which controls things, a coterie, and if there's a person who's not part of the group or who's not as strong as the rest of the group, that person is not allowed to have a say, either because that person is younger than everyone else, not senior enough. Sometimes it can be a very senior person who is being isolated. So, as a group leader, you must make sure you must not watch silently, even if you are part of the other group. You must make sure that you protect the weak and encourage the clash of ideas, because a clash of ideas is productive. If everyone gives assent, if everyone agrees to agree, it's not a great meeting, because that means you haven't generated interesting ideas. Instead, agree to disagree, have as many ideas as possible, have opposing ideas, let people express their dissent in a polite manner, but let them do it so that we get the best decision. Watch out for the suggestion squashing reflex. Now remember, real meetings are about ego, real meetings are about taking credit, real meetings are about showing your power. So, whenever you find that, you will find people, when somebody is coming out with a great idea, you will find the others would try to squash the reflexes to squash the suggestion, because you feel, okay, this person is making a very good impression and is going to get away with all the credit. So, you try to veto the idea, you try to rubbish the idea by saying, no, this is not a great idea. So, you must try to look out for people who squash the, who follow their reflex of squashing other people's ideas. And since it's always the junior people, it's always the younger people who are shy to speak up in a meeting, who need to muster their courage in order to speak at a meeting, you must try to first draw out the senior and junior colleagues first, and then come to the senior ones last. They would also have their say, but let those who might be intimidated by the senior colleagues have their say first. Now, what are the rules for digression? I am being contradictory, because earlier I said that you should stick to the schedule. I said that you must always come with a pre-prepared schedule, and you must always follow a predetermined time for each agenda and make sure that nothing goes out of way. Now, this kind of controlling meeting can actually be counterproductive, because sometimes digressions can be productive. When one goes off the agenda or one starts thinking freely, sometimes more creative ideas emerge. So, tangents can be surprisingly useful, but you have to decide whether to let a discussion go or cut it off. Now, here is a simple guide. If a discussion involves ideas, solutions or suggestions, let it run. If a discussion involves complaining or finger pointing without very quickly shifting to how a problem can be eliminated, cut it off. And trust me, most of the digressions I have encountered are of this kind, where people get into complaints or finger pointing at who did what wrong instead of trying to resolve a problem. So be professional, but don't worry too much about hurting feelings. Good employees appreciate a controlled, on-point, productive meeting, and poor employees quickly learn that whining isn't welcome. Now we come to the third part of a meeting, which is follow-up. What you could do to lead a meeting effectively. We come to the third part now, which is to follow up a meeting. It's quite common for people to come away from the same meeting with very different interpretations of what went on, because everyone has a different way of absorbing others' ideas, and everyone personalizes whatever is discussed, and they remember the parts that concern them, and they tend to forget what doesn't concern them, or maybe they were not paying attention. So how does one make sure that everyone remembers what was discussed at the meeting and there was a record of that? So to reduce this risk, email a memo highlighting what was accomplished to all who attended within 24 hours after the meeting, so that people who disagree with what happened, they have a chance to correct you. Maybe you have understood something right, or the person who is taking notes has got some points of somebody's statement wrong. So this is your chance to make sure when you circulate the minutes, if it needs to be formal, of the meeting within 24 hours, or it doesn't have to be a formal minutes. It could be just a simple email listing all the points that were discussed at the meeting. Document the responsibilities given, tasks delegated, and any assigned deadlines. That way everyone will be on the same page. So it's also not enough just to state what happened at the meeting, but also outline the plan of action, and according to the decisions made at the meeting, document who's expected to do what. So there's clarity and there's a follow-up, there's an action on what was discussed at the meeting. Now clearly identify decisions, takeaways, and action step. Every meeting should result in tangible outcomes. Make sure that everyone knows what was decided and what will be done. Otherwise, all you did was talk. So a discussion is never an outcome. So create accountability. We must be very clear about who's responsible for which actions. Make sure everyone knows. Never let ownership be fuzzy or unclear. An action item without a clear owner is an instant often. So now when you are publishing a meeting recap, whether it's minutes or an email, how must you do it? Just remember the action items. Don't include all the irrelevant details of the meeting. Only include the action items. State what was decided, what will be done, who will do it, and nothing else. Never include statements like discuss possibilities of realigning department responsibilities. If all you did was discuss realignment, shame on you, why didn't you make a decision? And including discussion in a recap implies that discussions without decisions are worthwhile. Don't give general discussions credibility by including them in the recap. Team members might start to think that general discussions do have value. Now, conduct initial follow-up offline. Establishing accountability places responsibilities on individuals, not necessarily the team as a whole. If you need a follow-up meeting, fine, but do so after progress has been made and reported on offline. As a leader, you should follow up individually, and team members should send progress emails to the team. Never meet when additional decisions need to be made. Never meet just to share updates that could have been shared offline. So with this, we move on to how to participate in a meeting, how to contribute effectively to a meeting, because yes, you will soon come to this stage, but most of you at this stage of your career who are starting out probably will just be contributing to a meeting and not leading a meeting. We will take that next.